fanciest you've ever dressed up in for one of our events? True.
I'm gonna try to put on these AirPods. We're gonna remove the background noise, but I don't know how to like turn this on or off.
Ooh, someone dialed in with the 510 number. Who's in the East Bay, dude? Are you guys doing like the dinner tonight or the wedding ceremony? Can't hear you. You're on mute.
They're doing both, saving money and doing it both at the same time.
Smart.
Variation.
Yeah. And are you actually at the restaurant or something?
Yeah. That's why I'm
The
trying to put
internet
up.
works.
Huh?
At least the internet works.
I'm like hotspotting myself here, so.
Better than that time. I think didn't the last year we had that class and you were in the car and like, I'm actually heading to Hot Pot.
Yeah.
So this is an upgrade.
We've had worse.
And then tomorrow night you're going to James's party then.
Yep.
Yay.
When is this party?
I need to hound him to go visit the hotel tomorrow then.
Yeah. He's already in Long Beach.
Is he? Oh, good.
Yeah. For his party's gonna be hosted in Long Beach. So it's like, well, now you have to go.
Well, the other place is like 30 minutes away. That's in Anaheim. And I really like that place.
Oh, so we're set on Anaheim then.
Well, no, so there's Anaheim, and then back up is the Long Beach, but I feel that the Anaheim one is a lot bigger, is double the size of what we had last year in terms of the hotel. So in case, like, you know, how the rooms oversold last year, so this one would be better to accommodate.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but the spacing is roughly around the same. So we just probably have to like clean up like the chairs to fit it better.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Nelson. Hey, Annie.
Hi.
I missed the other two classes this week, so I thought I'd try to pop into this one. I won't be able to stick around for the whole thing, but just want to hang out for a little bit and absorb what I can.
Don't worry. I recorded it.
Cool.
Hey, Dennis,
Yeah.
where are you from?
LA. I'm in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Good. You're close, so you don't have an excuse, but
Sure.
temporarily mark your calendar dates for August 13 and 14 of
Okay.
August next year.
You got it. August 13 and 14. Okay, cool. What's happening?
Oh, is it no, actually, sorry, 12, 13 that weekend.
12-13. You got it.
Yeah, I'm not telling anyone yet, but I don't know. A certain people, you know, and a certain number of people might be showing up near you guys.
Okay, cool. I'll be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm originally from the Bay Area, so relocated down here. My wife was like, let's move to LA.
Because you got annoyed with the cold.
No, actually, I don't mind the cold, actually. We both don't mind the cold. And then it's just her family's from here. So then we decided to move down here. Yeah.
Where were you from in the Bay?
I grew up in San Jose. I lived in San Francisco, lived in Oakland, lived in Cupertino. So pretty much almost everywhere. Yeah.
Dude, you really did take a lap around the Bay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what do you invest in?
I haven't started yet. I'm still kind of learning the process, hoping to do my first investment in 2023. But yeah, looking for like a cash flow for property somewhere in the Midwest. I heard Ohio is a good place to start.
Ohio, yep.
Yeah.
Watch out for Cleveland, though. I know it looks nice, but you know, there's a lot of risk to it. George will probably tell you plenty, and then there's quite a few people who've done Cleveland. Some successfully, others not so much. So.
Yeah, it does seem like a mixed bag.
Very
Right.
mixed bag,
But focus on location and don't pick the cheapest things,
Yeah, for sure.
pick cleaner things. So it's like they do have seasons over there and pipes do burst.
I heard. Yeah.
Here's about Detroit though, funny enough. Someone's mentioning it's like a little bit back on the up in terms of job growth. And so it's okay now compared to what it was in the past, but
Yeah.
I'll see when I believe it.
Yeah.
I'm still sticking with Texas and Atlanta for now.
Have you started investing in there? Or are you still looking into it? Texas and Atlanta.
I have a whole lot over in Texas already, and
Cool.
started in Atlanta recently.
We both own in Texas already, so
yeah. I'm trying to do this game where I want to get like, something in each major city in Texas. Just
That'll
for
be
kicks.
good.
I might need Nelson's help on that. I still need Austin.
I'll let you know when I find something.
I'll take a little piece. I don't need the whole thing.
Which cities are you in already, Annie, for Texas?
I'm in Houston, near Houston, and Dallas.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I looked into Houston a while ago. I like that they have what is it, the
No
cancer
zoning?
research. What's that? Oh, no zoning. Well, I was looking. I saw that they the Cancer Research Center, right? Like one of the bigger cancer research places in Houston, in the U.S. And then there's that.
Too much attention on that one.
Oh, okay.
Mostly, they had like a lot of different. They have a lot of industries over there. Like there's energy sectors already, and a lot of tech companies are going in there. So mostly kind of focus on that one. But
there's like this.
There's
like this. Yeah. I think the medical place is what I was referring to, and then they had the energy corridor or something like that, right? Where there's a bunch of
where the hospitals are pretty expensive. That's kind of toward the center area, the Bayou.
Notice that too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the Rice University. So pricey. But yeah, you are in a great place to be in if you are a newbie and trying to learn how to invest out of state. And we're also, I mentioned we're going to Florida to hit up Orlando and Jacksonville. So there's going to be like a variety of classes like short-term rental, long-term rental, from fixer-uppers, syndication. So like it's going to be like a variety from beginning to end. So like
that's in February, right?
Yeah, last week of February.
That's like last week of February. Okay, I might be able to swing that. It's just I'm an accountant, so then January to March is typically pretty busy.
Don't worry, I wrote for my CPA to come along, so you can complain about my dates with him.
Is it the CPA dude?
I'm trying to drag him down. He's my neighbor, so it's like, just come. You never go out to my events, So like, just come on and hang, and like all the stuff that you learn, like you're not expected to buy in, Orlando, but like you want to take the tools that you learn and apply it to any of the regions that you were interested in.
Yeah, definitely.
Nelson, did you want to try and load the PowerPoints? It's so funny. He's in a suit today where I'm in my pajamas because it's my work from day home. So work from day means I spend 20% of my 40 hours a day doing SARE stuff.
Nice.
Or napping. I only get one a week. I know, I only get one a week though. Yeah, but thank you for sticking around this whole time for the last 2 weeks, Dennis.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for all the hard work and putting this on. Really appreciate it. Super helpful.
Hey, Luan, I see your name out there. Don't hide. How you doing? Okay, I am at a wedding. Fun fact. So I'm unable to squeeze out of the noise a little bit in the background. So if it's too much, please let me know. But I think I'm in a place that's far enough away. There's a twinkle twinkle little star in the back, I think. But today we're going to talk about operations and how to run things. These are the boring details. These are the things that happen once you buy the property. Now, we're going to talk about what you're putting in an offer, finding the agent, finding your team, and then a checklist for typical due diligence. It wouldn't be possible, of course, without these sponsors who contributed, and we're going to tag them for the ones that are pertinent to that specific slide. So step one, how do you buy a property? Well, put under contract, then you send the earnest money and option fee, then you figure out the issues with the inspector and then sue them for anything they've missed. And then finally, you negotiate before the due diligence period ends. What do some of those words mean? I'll jump right into it. First, we're going to talk about your contract. You are going to put down something called an earnest money deposit. It shows them, hey, I like this home so much that I'm willing to commit 1% of the price of the home that I lose if I cannot close on this house, right? So $100,000 house, you put $1,000 down to commit to the property. Now, what is an earnest option fee? That's a non-refundable fee to get under contract. So that, for example, in Texas is like $500 just to get under contract. You never get the money back, even if, you know, everything falls apart and you have your contingencies. You lose both the $1,000 that you put for earnest money deposit and also that $500 earnest money fee. So some cities, like Chicago, we didn't actually have an option fee, but this one. Then you're also going to put the closing date, which is obviously very important. You need a month on average for most closings, 10 days for cash offers. Then you talk about also the purchase price. And then sometimes you should put your picture and cover letter, which is now legal to do in California and Oregon because people think that you can select for race, you know, sometimes with that. Now, how do you protect yourself? That's what contingencies are for. Contingencies protect you and get your earnest money back. Because $1,000 might sound like not a lot, but if you're buying, say, $300,000 house or now a 10-unit building that's, you know, $10 million, 1% is $100,000. So then the contingency matters a lot. Now, you have the inspection and due diligence, right? So this is important because if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to want to keep this clause. What it says is in the first 7 days or 10 or however many you set, typically it's 7, you can back out at any point and get all of your earnest money back, right? This is what you need the inspector for, because they'll check for any mistakes for you, and then you can do your due diligence in that meantime and get that money back. Then you have your financing, which is you can back out if you can't get a mortgage. This is usually hard to get approved. Most people don't want a financing contingency, then appraisal contingency. So this is your third party appraiser comes back and says the price is just totally way off base, in which case then you can back out as well. Most people waived this in the last 2 years in order to get approved by a seller because prices were going up so much that comps weren't keeping up. Then you have title contingency. This is a legal document that shows that there are judgments or other loans attached to the home. So the option fee and the earnest money are both required typically. Usually the earnest money is required. The option fee, it depends on the city you're in. In Texas, we have the option fee. Chicago, we didn't. The earnest money is pretty much something you have to do across the country. I haven't really seen anything where there's no earnest money because you need to put it down to commit to say that you're going to buy the property, right? That way there's a risk if you don't close. Because in that period, you need to check to make sure that everything is clear to go. Then finally, there's a home sale contingency. I haven't seen this that often, but it says the home that you're buying only moves forward if the person buying your home manages to sell a house that they currently are under contract to sell, right? So this is like usually when somebody upgrades a home or downsizes, right? They need to get rid of their old property in order to afford the new property. And so they put a contingency in there that says, I'm not going to close unless the other property closes. So Now we're going to talk about buying out of state. This is pretty important because, as everyone knows, California, New York, some of these coastal cities where most of us are in, are not the best returns, even though they're great places to live. So what do you have to do when you are investing out of state? It's really important that you build a team. So referrals are your key component. The best way to get referrals is to just hire an agent who knows everybody in town, right? Or just talk to other investors, go to meetups who are also investing in that same area. A good property manager and a good contractor are the most important things when you're operating out of state. Those are the people that your agent can bring and other investors can usually offer you. Then ideally, you can also have someone in town you trust who can vet to make sure that the property manager is actually doing their job. And then finally, there's smart technology, which tends to help with the management portion of it as well. So how do you vet, though, these agents and property managers? Well, step one, don't trust all their numbers. Do your own research, even if it's a referral that came highly recommended from somebody else. Then don't fight for the cheapest price. Sometimes those aren't the best service providers. And to me, I'm at a stage where I know quality is worth it compared to just getting the bottom dollar. Obviously, don't go for the high end, but ideally you want a good balance of both, which means typically you don't want to pay the cheapest contractor. You want someone somewhere in the middle or slightly below it. But they can provide outstanding quality compared to somebody else, right? And if the pricing doesn't work, then next time just underwrite better and purchase it even cheaper, right? So agents and PMs, what do you ask them? To me, this is order of importance. One, how do they specialize with investors? And any variation of that question, for example, how many properties have you sold in the last year for investors, not just people who are buying their first primary home, right? Any variation of these questions work. Or how many properties do you manage, right, for investors, not just people who are buying for the first time. Then, can they calculate cash flow? This is something I want both the agent and the property manager to be able to calculate, because how do they know if they're hitting their numbers if they can't calculate cash flow, right? Believe it or not, there are property managers who don't know how to do this. Do they have a list of contractors I can contact? You know, this is important because you want the right service providers. And like I said, referrals are key, and you want somebody who has good enough bulk of work and that their word can boost your standing with this contractor, right? For example, this agent might recommend 30% of this contractor's work. This contractor is not going to screw over this client then, because that's 30% of the revenue. Otherwise, that they would lose if they didn't do a good job, right? So this is why referral systems tend to work well, and Yelp doesn't always, or Angie's List doesn't always tell the full truth, because a lot of those can be bought. And then finally, the most important thing that that investors that are on their fifth, sixth property might care about is their deal source unique? What this means is, are they marketing in a different way? Are they sending mailers? Are they texting? Because the problem is, anyone can really access the MLS nowadays, right? You can go on Zillow, you're going to see the same thing agents are. So if they just add you on MLS, what value are they giving you as an agent? Unless you're saying, hey, this is on MLS, but I can figure out how to get this for you for 20% off. If they're just sending you MLS properties, that's not worth your time as an investor. This is different if you're a primary person, right? Because you can do the same research. So to me, the value is, can they do something that's different than what other agents are doing on the market at the moment? So now we're going to talk about operating this rental property. So 1, how do you manage a rental? 2, how do you manage a rehab? And then 3, how do you find your tenants? This is really important for me. I highly recommend everyone else take the same advice. I got this from a book, but it's about keeping your life separate, because otherwise they start to mix and mingle and you get inundated with complexities that you would otherwise not want to deal with. The first one, get a Google Voice phone number. When you buy that property, use that Google Voice number. Don't use your own number, because that's public information. The moment you buy that property, everyone's going to know how to contact you, and that's how you get spam callers. People contacting you saying, how do I purchase this property from you? So use a Google Voice number specifically, then keep a separate email as well. A real estate email is going to be important because you're going to get blasted with different emails at some point. It's the cheapest way for people to contact you besides a phone number. And so I highly recommend keeping that separate as well. And then make a separate bank account. This is going to make your bookkeeping infinitely easier, especially if you have Wave or one of those automatic connecting websites. You can just go backwards, match the receipt. A lot of people aren't good at paperwork. Just keep the separate bank account. Then finally, tell people you're the property manager. Don't say that you're the owner. People don't actually like owners because they think all owners are rich, even though they don't know how little cash flow you might be making. So you should be telling people you're just managing the property for, say, a rich uncle who unfortunately had to raise rent this year. It's not your fault. You're just doing what he told you. Now, how do you find a tenant? Well, Zillow is the most popular website for applicants. It's where most people default to when they're looking for a rental. Below that, there's apartments.com, there's Zumper, etc. This is only if you're doing it yourself. And if you are doing it yourself, I highly recommend getting a smart lock so people can show the properties for themselves. I'll explain this later, but the other option is to be fully hands-off and then hire a leasing agent or a property manager. And typically they'll take a month of rent as a placement fee for a new tenant. It's a lot less work than doing it yourself. So how does one manage a rental? Well, you got to vet your tenant. That's number one. What are ways to vet? Income, right? Actually call their employer that they applied with. Contact HR and say, hey, this person is applying for a rental. Can I ask if he actually works at your company, right? And that's the most important thing. Then you also want to make sure that income is actually 3 times higher than the area that you're, than the rent that you're trying to charge. Typically anything beyond that, they tend to be very tight then on rent, and it's a higher risk. If they don't qualify, usually what you can do is ask them to get a guarantor to fill the difference. And the guarantor usually has high enough income to match. Then you also want to limit certain dog breeds. Pit bulls are about 70% of all dog bite claims according to statistics. And so most landlords just kind of limit pit bulls and also certain other aggressive dog breeds, but also usually can use the excuse that, hey, the insurance company is going to charge me more, or they won't allow me to insure this property if you have one of these aggressive breeds. Then you also want to do an actual background and credit check. Avail has this, apartments.com, Zillow, pretty much any software for rental management is going to have some version of an online credit and background check to make sure this person you're bringing in is safe. And then home checks is something that we do in Chicago. Chicago's a blue state or city, very progressive pro-tenant laws. So how do we get around that? We're just even more stringent on our checks. We will actually go to the former site that the tenant lived at, do a home visit to see how they took care of the place. And then we will use that in our judgment of, do we bring this person in as a tenant? Because if we have to evict them, it's going to take anywhere from 2 to 3 months, which is maybe not a lot of time for people who invest, not in California, but in Chicago, that's quite a bit of time, especially compared to what we're doing right now in Florida and Texas, which takes about 2 to 3 weeks, right? So these are things to all consider. You know, we don't want to have to evict people, but ideally you want the option to, which is why this is just another optional extra check to make sure that this person's taking care of your property. I know somebody right now who regrets not doing a home check on a current tenant that they have, because they're absolutely trashing the place. And even though it's pretty much a brand new rental that they got rehab when they bought it. So tech stack. So what do I use? Stessa. That's my preferred accounting software. It's free. It connects to a bank account. I don't have a separate bank account for every property, but I do have a separate credit card. It's a lot easier to sign up for new credit cards than it is bank accounts. This will actually spread it out based on credit cards and bank accounts. And so this saves me a lot of time and effort trying to track down receipts. I just directly connect it to a specific card. But now I have, I don't know, 20 credit cards, which isn't fun, but the perk of it is that I save a lot more time at the end of the year once I'm doing all my financial rigmarole. Base build is great for rehabs. You know, they keep track of your tenant base, but also they keep track of how much it costs for different line items and making sure that you pretty much don't go over budget. Then there's also general smart tech. I love smart locks, right? I use them for contractors and for tenants for self-showing. This means I don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. when they lock themselves out, lose their key, but also for self-showings, they can actually walk themselves in. Usually what I request when I get an interested tenant is I say, hey, can you send me your ID, your personal information, and then you can, go whenever you want. And once they're in front of the house, I send them a one-time code specifically for that house so that when they visit, they don't need me to be there to show the house for them. I then have their ID. So if they, break anything, there's any funny business, then I have evidence that they were there. Another thing I usually ask for is that they take a selfie in front of the house so that I have more evidence that they were there. I don't know if it makes that much of a difference. Again, I got this advice from an older investor who told me it saved me a lot of time in terms of actually having to drive to a rental, show up, and then just to open a door for somebody. And people actually like it more when you're not trying to sell them something. They prefer to walk it and make the decision for themselves. So that's something I've learned a lot as well, that it's better if I'm not there and they show themselves. Nest, this is the reason I mention this is because 75% of renters have said that they're willing to pay more rent every month for smart tech. And Nest is one of those things because it cuts down utility costs. It's good for the environment, but also tenants they enjoy the control. They enjoy feeling like it's higher end. A Nest is only like another $100, $200, but it looks good enough for most people that they're willing to pay a premium, right? Security cameras, obviously security is very important depending on your neighborhood too. People care about that. Then management software, Zillow Rental Manager is great. Apartments.com is great. There's a slew of different options that you can use for managing tenants because it's pretty cheap now. Everything is like free or some version of free for apartment management. And usually what they do is they sell your data and that's how they make money because they usually run apartment complexes and larger buildings. So they take your data and then use that to translate for them to operate even better. So how do you manage a rehab? Step one, always get multiple bids. 2, never pay full price. Smaller projects, you can pay full price up front, but most of the time you want to pay in specific draws. And then as you progress through the project, you will pay the eventual full amount. Don't pay it up front if you don't have to, because that's how you get contractors walking out on you or never paying the final price. One thing I do, for example, is I always get a W-9. That's required by law for you during your taxes. And it's going to be annoying as heck if they've already done the job and then a year later you try to get that W-9. So I actually hold the last 10% of every job until I get that W-9, even if they've finished everything else. And to me, it's like, it's easy. Just go on your computer, fill out the form, send it to me. And then that's an extra few $100 right back to you. And so, I've gotten some pushback on it, but it's never been like enough where I'm like, it's this easy for you to sign up and just give me your W-9. Like, how hard does it, how hard is it compared to like the last $400 that you need to get for this job, right? And so to me, I think it's a pretty fair thing that I hold off portions of it. Other GCs I met probably do the same or have dealt with a lot of GCs. And so holding portions is very important. But if it's a one-day job, just pay it up front, let them finish it. Anything longer than that, I do draws. So
what's their typical rationale for holding or not giving you the W-9 sooner rather than later?
Because they're contractors, they're not paper pushers.
Okay.
So it's like the effort of getting and sending a W-9, that or they're trying to avoid taxes themselves.
Okay, that's what I thought. Maybe the second point that you made. All right. Cool, thanks.
Okay, and then what do you do when you're out of state managing a rehab? Well, ask to see prior work and then to take photos of it after every day. This is a conversation that I had with a contractor where I did a remote flip. They took a photo at the end of every day for the portion of work that they did. And so we got to see updates happen in real time, right? It also helps if they don't want to take photos for you, get a camera, set up Wi-Fi. That way you can check in every day on their progress. Either or works. Ideally the first one, because then you don't have to do as much work and you don't have to pay as much to install Wi-Fi to get them to finish the work, all right? And then finally, how do you go up from there? You keep scaling, right? Well, why do you scale? Because your expenses keep getting lower. Your income might stay the same, but it's really costs keep coming down, especially this graph here. You might not understand it now, but the expense ratio is your income, your revenue, sorry, not your income, your revenue minus, it's basically your expenses divided by your total revenue, right? That's the best way I can explain it. Most of the time it's 50%. That's a rule of thumb people give to be conservative. But this is the data for up until 2016, according to NCREIF, of how do you estimate expense ratios for different properties. 0809, there was a lot of pain. So expenses were higher because there was more turnover, and then people also didn't pay rent on time, right? So there's a lot of costs associated with the expense ratio back then. But you can see very clearly that buildings with less than 150 units are about 2% more expensive than buildings over 150 units. That gap keeps increasing the smaller and smaller the properties go. So by the time you're operating a 30 or 40 unit, it gets a lot more time and effort consuming, but you don't have enough money generated from that revenue to hire full-time staff. So really scale happens around 100 units, where you can afford somebody to do full-time property management work on site. That includes also the maintenance person, usually part-time, for about 100 units. Anywhere around like 80 to 100, I've seen this start working for people. Same thing happens in, if you have enough 30 units added up together, maybe you can like get a 90 unit and then the math works there as well. But most of the time it's just hard to have things sporadically all over. And then you have to figure out scale separately from there. But that's the perk of going big. How do you get to 100 units? Well, it's kind of hard. A lot of times you have to raise capital, operate. That's pretty much how I got to 200. That's currently what we're managing. I have a few hundred other units where I helped other people raise money for, but I don't actually asset manage or operate or deal with those on a day-to-day basis. Whereas the 200 I do manage came from pretty much this process of realizing things are going to cost more for me until I keep scaling more and more. Sharika? Question?
Yes, hi. I was wondering the importance of the W-9, if you wouldn't mind just going over why that's important, because tax stuff is like a completely different language for me. I don't get taxes. I have an investment property, and I call contractors there to do handyman type work. Am I supposed to be getting a W-9 for them? Or is that just for like when you're rehabbing a house, and which I did for this house also, and I never got a W-9 when I did the rehab?
Yeah, you should be getting a W-9. So you know how everyone's complaining about how the government is asking that any Venmo transactions over $600, you need to file 1099s for? This is exactly
okay.
Basically, if you pay any contractor more than $600, the government wants to know who you're paying. So the W-9 has their information for their address and their social or whatever business ID that they have for taxes. You use that to file 1099 at the end of the year to indicate to the government that you paid a contractor this much money. So that way the government can go backwards later on if they need to make sure that the other person is paying their taxes if you're claiming that you paid an expense to this person. Otherwise, the government's going to have a harder time creating that paper trail, because you just say, hey, I hired, contractor Jim off of Home Depot. And then you just say, I spent $30,000. They're going to say, like, who's Jim? Like, how do you track him down, right? And they want to know, is Jim paying taxes on that? And so the W-9 just has the information for you to file the 1099 at the end of the year. The 1099 is actually what you really care about in terms of filing taxes with your CPA. The W-9 just gives you the information about the 1099. And most people already have a W-9 on hand, which is why it's easier than asking them to fill out a 1099 form.
Okay. Do I give them the 1099 form from the IRS website, or do they give me the W-9, the contractor?
They give you the W-9. They give you their tax information and their address and all the information that they need, because you gave them income. So you have to show that you paid this contractor a 1099 worth of income.
Okay, and if I haven't done this in the past, since I'm just kind of becoming aware of it, do I have to go back retroactively to?
You should. I would talk to your CPA. It depends.
Okay. Okay.
Again, anything over 600, the government wants to see, but again, too high of a number is when they really pay attention. If you're doing like, if you have like maybe 5 or 6 transactions and they're all like, 2,000 or 3,000, maybe they won't check, but I'm not a CPA. I don't know. Ideally, they want you to be flagged, because if the government does find out, they're going to come after you to ask for the difference if you can't prove that this is a contract that you paid, right? And so just something to be cautious about.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mercedes says, if you refuse to provide a W-9, is it a signal to ditch them? Possibly. Again, some people are okay with paying for cheaper labor that doesn't have a W-9 or taxable identification because the price is so much cheaper, right? So that's something that people do, but they don't actually put that, they don't actually write that off as an expense on their taxes come, tax season. They don't include that at all in the bookkeeping, if you understand what I'm saying. Mike said, is there a way to verify SSN for contractor? No, you could just say like, you can, there's like, but I've never gone as far to verify the social. I've just only had it as like the document that they sent me, so that I can't talk about this. A CPA probably knows better, but to me, I think I can argue like, hey, this is what I was given. I didn't realize they were lying about it. Most of the time, if it's a professional contractor, they have an EIN or a tax ID number for a business, not just a social. So, and he said, if you use track 1099 to run the W-9, it'll tell you there's an error with their social security number. So there's that too as well. Okay, I think I tackled all the questions. Does anyone else have anything to talk about tonight? Otherwise, I'm gonna head over to a wedding. Any other questions? How do you find contractors? There you go. Agents. Typically, agents, I think, are the best way to convince like the contractor that you're reliable, you're going to pay on time, but also that they shouldn't screw you over, because you're going to tell the agent, and the agent's going to turn around and tell all the other clients, don't use this guy ever again. The other way is show up at Home Depot at 6 or 7 a.m. Those are the best contractors in the game usually, because those are the people who care the most, the ones who show up on time and to get the work done. So I love those contractors when I'm like, hey, I need this job done. And they say like, hey, I'll be there at 8 a.m. I'm like, I don't remember last time I woke up at 8 a.m. work, or I was ready by 8 a.m. for work. I will wake up maybe at 8, but to be at a job site to get ready to do business, like that to me means like it's a contractor who cares what they're doing and they show up on time. And so contractors like that, usually you can find at Home Depot, or you can find them through, this one I actually found through, there's this website called TaskRabbit. He had great ratings, and then, our relationship built off of that. He was training to be a master electrician, which is usually about 100 an hour. He charges me still 40 an hour. So, I'm paying the journeyman rate, which is great compared to like paying a master electrician rate, but he shows up on time, he does good work, and I'm happy to give him money because of that. Joe, how do you find contractors? Or no, Mike, are property managers required to keep copies of rental applications, credit checks? No, credit checks are supposed to expire typically. They're not supposed to keep that personal information. However, they can keep copies of the rental applications. So for example, questions that they ask like pets and where are you employed, stuff like that, they can keep. But typically you don't want to hold on to any sensitive information around their social or etc. Mike, as the owner, should we have access to Zillow applications or account that the property manager uses to rent out our property? Ideally, you want access to them. But again, even Zillow, they do the same way. After 30 days, it expires and you can no longer access that information. For pretty much just what I mentioned, which is to protect the user privacy and the data of the applicants. Do you usually hire a designer before doing rehab? I don't. Some people do, some people don't. It's really up to you. I mean, if you have an eye for it, I would do it, yourself. But a lot of contractors like GCs usually have a pretty good design eye. And so I would kind of rely on previous photos of prior work for that. Hiring a designer is just an extra cost you have to take on if you do want to do it. Personally, for me, I've been very lucky with finding good GCs that can also do design work. One of my tenants has a pit bull. How bad is that? Any suggestions? I mean, well, hopefully you're charging pet rent. So either an extra 20, 30 bucks a month, or you're charging an upfront fee, mainly because they tend to be higher wear and tear on the buildings, right? They're heavier, they tend to be more aggressive, right? So that's a lot more damage on your walls and your floors. And so if you're not charging higher for pet fees, you should be, right? The other thing is they are a lot of bites, but not every dog is bad. And if you already have them there, I mean, might as well keep them for another year if they haven't harmed any other tenants yet. It's just every new tenant's pit bull is a gamble. You never know if they're well trained or if they were a rescue that was, formerly in dog fighting rings, and they have trauma associated with that. So Mercedes, who buys materials and how to avoid contractors from stealing them for other use? It's up to you. You will save more money always if you buy your own materials. Contractors will always charge up, but it's more effort for you to pick up those materials. That's just the way it is. So you can buy them, but you're going to end up having to drive to Home Depot, pick out what you like, be more specific on it. It's hard to avoid your contractor stealing them for other use, but typically you still want to buy more than you need to, so you don't make more Home Depot trips. Otherwise, you're going to end up buying not enough, and then they're going to say, hey, go back to Home Depot because I need another can of paint. And you're like, I wish I had bought more. The only way to really have a good idea of it is just have a contractor that you can trust. And honestly, to me, labor is way more expensive than materials. So unless they're stealing like thousands of dollars of flooring, in which case then I'd be like, hey, what's going on? Most of the time, even if they take an extra, can of paint, which is like $300, like an extra day of work for them is another $500-600 to me. And so material to me, while it's expensive, it's not as expensive as the labor portion. And that's usually what I care more about. Are they finishing the job faster or on time? Not are they trying to save every bit of material that they can to maximize use from it. Mike, is there a way to prevent random person to sign up for a Zillow account posing as owner manager of a property? No, but they actually put a lot of checks in place recently. I know apartments.com has this. I think Zillow has this as well. When you try to sign up for a property as a rental, they actually ask you to upload information proving that you're the landlord or the owner or property manager who has access to the owner's information. Annie, probably want to remind people to buy the proper insurance too. Non-owner occupied required tenant insurance. That's correct. If you're buying insurance, make sure it's for rental insurance or for if you're living in an insurance. And believe it or not, short-term rental insurance is a separate insurance than long-term renter insurance. So make sure you get all the proper coverage, because what happens is somebody hurts themselves and you don't have the right type of coverage. They're not going to protect you. So you might as well buy the right kind instead of trying to wiggle your way around it. Sharika, do you hire a general contractor on rehab jobs, like a project manager, and use the typical fee? I hire a general contractor if we're renovating like multiple pieces. If it's like, hey, I just want to update the bathroom, that's one contractor. I'm not going to hire a GC. I'm just going to get a plumber and then have somebody do the handiwork later on, right? So like typically their fees around 10 to 20% of the actual contract for their sub contractors, and they add like 10%. A lot of times they're worth it because they actually get your job done on time, and then they have vetted subcontractors, so you're not gambling that somebody's going to screw you over on it. But typically, yeah, GC is kind of like a project manager. The bigger the job, the more I would recommend using a GC instead of just figuring it out yourself along the way.
And are there any, is there any paperwork or contract you make with a big rehab job with a contractor who's doing a big rehab job that's like, that's going to cost a lot of money to do rehab with, like, especially with the GC?
Yes.
And if so, where do you get those contracts to do work with them?
Typically, the GC will already have a contract. If they're professional, then they're going to bullet and line item the things they're going to cover. And so that's the contract. You can then go back to that punch list and say, hey, you didn't cover the bathroom, even though I signed this contract and we both agreed that you're to do this work, right? If you want anything more extreme, you can add specific clauses, but then you're going to have to hire a lawyer, which will be anywhere from 500 to maybe 1,000 to draft something up, especially if they've done it in the past. Clauses, I've seen people add bonuses if they finish early, penalties if they go over time and finish late, right? I've also seen people say like, hey, I will pay for materials, and if material costs go down, you pay the difference or whatever, because I think material costs are going to go down, right? So this was a developer I knew who said, hey, you guys can build this, but I want you to wait like 2 months because I think the cost of lumber is going down. And if it doesn't, I will pay the difference that you have to pay for your labor to wait an extra 2 months while waiting for lumber to come down. And then, prices came down and he, made a pretty big windfall because he didn't pay as much. So there's always stuff like that. Wendy, any recommendation for landlord insurance? If it's older than 20 years old, get plumbing insurance. Like if it was built in 1984, which is a building I had, get the plumbing insurance, get the flood insurance. It's worth it because you start getting older pipes and decades of people throwing dumb stuff down those toilets. And so you just want to include that just in case. Liability insurance for like $30 is also worth it. LLC is gonna be a lot more expensive. Mercedes, how long is a typical property manager contract? What are the common exit terms? Again, the common exit terms, like I said, they typically have draws, and you can stipulate, hey, that last 10% I'm going to hold out until I do a final approval and you've covered every line item and I get, say, a W-9, right? That's something you can actually put in the contract. Then how long is a typical property manager contract? It really depends on how big the contract work is, right? It could be a 1 month job. It could be a 2 month job. It could go longer than 2 months, right? So the contract really just depends on what you're trying to do with this renovation.
There's a question from Mike. What options do people have dealing with difficult property managers if they're not doing it on their end and they have no official property management contract?
Fire them, hire someone else. You have no official contract, so hopefully they didn't take money for you yet, because then that's going to be more difficult. So, but the point of the contract is to protect both of y'all in case you do want to leave because you think the property manager is underperforming. That being said, the last 3 months have been pretty tough on the market, especially because holidays are the worst time to get a leased tenant in there. So if you've only been operating with them for 3 months, 2 of those months are the worst months of the year to get a tenant. So I wouldn't necessarily blame them yet. Give them until January or February, because winter is typically the hardest time to get somebody interested in moving, right? You have holidays, you have travel. It's a very hard time to get people to come out to look at a property and then agree to move their whole life from one place to the next. Okay, I think that's it for tonight. Hopefully I tackled all your questions, and I'm going to call it a good night. Thank you everyone for showing up and joining our 30-day challenge series. If you have any other questions, Annie and I are always available to help, and as are all the members of SARE who are more professional than us. So have a good night, everyone. See you guys next year.